So that's all good and, you know, sunshine and rainbows and all that stuff, right? When everything like works out good. But would it be all right if I actually share with you some tough decisions and kind of tough things, some of the pain points that I've gone through in that process and just as a real estate investor? Because look, the one thing that, and this is part of the reason you guys are here, right? Not only to learn, but you want to be inspired, right? You want to be motivated. And is that happening this weekend? Are you guys inspired and motivated, right? All right, yeah, let's give everyone a round of applause, right? Yep. All right. And I also want to talk about some of the stuff that a lot of people don't like talking about, right? Where you make mistakes, where you lose money, where you have some of your most, you know, embarrassing moments. So I just shared with you the model that I had starting out as a real estate investor. And this was early on when I was dating who's now my wife. Alexis is her name. We weren't married at the time. And, you know, I'm talking about everything that I'm doing, all the wealth that I'm creating, all the properties, all this, all that. And so one day she just says to me, she says, Doug, she says, you talk about making all this money. Where is it? I was like, whoa. Oh, like that was my response. Like I had no answer, right? You want to talk about like throwing me for a loop, and it's one of the things I love about her because she keeps me in check and keeps me honest, right? I was literally speaking. I didn't know how to answer it, and I was obviously really angry and upset initially. But after days after, kind of, you know, thinking about what she said, like, you know, she made a point, right? Any of you ever have people in your life, maybe even coming to this seminar, like, what are you going to that seminar for? What, you know, whatever, right? As you start down that path. Now, she wasn't coming from a negative aspect. She was just coming from an authentic, being real aspect. What are you doing? You're talking about this. Where's the money? So it had me learn an extremely valuable lesson and something that I am so passionate and adamant about now with everything that I do. And that's about being accountable and specifically accounting. Right? And as the statement says there, accounting leads to accountability. And I'm a big Robert Kiyosaki fan. Any Robert Kiyosaki fans in the room? So this is a quote from his book, Guide to Becoming Rich Without Cutting Up Your Credit Cards. And I was reading this right at the same time Alexis had that zinger with me, and I was like, wow, this is me. So it says, if you're willing to face the truth and learn from your mistakes, you will learn far more about money than I could ever teach you. He went on to explain, saying, when you face your own personal financial statement, you face yourself and your own financial challenges. You begin to find out what you know and what you did not know. When you look at your financial statement, you become accountable to yourself. As I said, facing my financial problems and solving them was the best education I could have received, because by facing my mistakes, I became accountable for my own shortcomings. By facing my financial statement, I found out that I had failing grades. I realized that I was not as financially smart as I thought I was. By improving those grades, I learned what I needed to learn in order to become a millionaire, and that is the price I paid. I paid the price because I really wanted to become a millionaire. And so for me, when I looked at my financial statement, I realized I did have a bunch of good things going, but I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, because the numbers don't lie. The numbers are what the numbers are. And so this is exactly what my financial statement looked like. I had a bunch of real estate that I owned. The great news, it was, well, that's the bad news. That's not the good news, right? So I had $70,000 in personal credit card debt, right? So I'm talking about creating wealth, doing all these things, right? I do own a rental real estate portfolio. But I had 70 grand in credit card debt, which I, wasn't really looking at, right? And I did have income coming in, and because of this, I thought I had a money problem, right? It's like, man, I have 70 grand in credit card debt. Well, I got to make more money to pay it off, right? I got a money problem. I need to be making more money. And that actually wasn't what it was. The issue that I had was I had a deal structure problem in terms of how I was structuring my deals. Because I was great at finding deals. I spoke to you about the structure that we were doing, right? That structure works. The issue was, though, as I said, I started out as a broke college student. When I raised money, I was partnering with people that were giving me money, and we were splitting things 50-50. Anyone ever heard that? Hey, let's partner together, let's do this, and we'll be 50-50 on things? Well, one of the things my mentor says is 50-50 is always unfair. No matter what it is, it's always unfair, except maybe in some short-term opportunities. And here's the reason why, right? This is what I experienced, because I said, look, I'm going to do all the, you're excited, you're inspired, you want to raise money. It's like, give me that money, I'm going to do all the work, I'm going to handle everything, and we'll split the profits, right? I was 21 at the time. I got the money, I was the happiest kid in the world, things couldn't be rosier, but how we structured it didn't work. And the problem with that is I was going to do all the work, so I was managing the property. Well, first I had to find the deal, right? Then we had to renovate it, so I had to spend my time to manage the construction. I wasn't doing the construction because my wife's better than that stuff than me. So I wasn't doing the construction, but I was managing the construction. Then we had to find a tenant, so I was finding the tenant. Then we had to manage the property, and I was managing the property. But I didn't get paid any money yet because it's 50-50. We're splitting the profits 50-50. No money's come through the door yet. And depending on the size of your project or how long it is, that process initially for me when I first started out took about 3 months. It wasn't bad, right? As I got larger deals, 6 months, 18 months, 24 months, they become much longer cycles, right? Now, fortunately, I realized I had a deal structure problem before things were 24 months out, right? But I was structuring all these deals that way, and I wasn't getting compensated for the things that I was doing to get it to that point. And I learned some valuable distinctions, and this is extremely important as you look to structure your deals, is understanding the difference between an operational contribution versus an asset contribution. So some examples of operational contributions are, again, doing the renovation and construction, could be managing the rehabs, accounting, bookkeeping, property management, maintenance, right? If you go out in the field and you need some work done, is a contractor going to charge you money to do the work? Yes, right? If you then need a property manager and they're going to find a tenant for you and then manage the property for you, are they going to charge you for it? Yeah. Well, I was so focused on the 50%, I wasn't thinking about what I was doing operational-wise. So that as we started to grow, as we started to scale, I couldn't spend my time doing those things because we had too many projects going on, right? So I had to then hire people to manage the construction, to manage the properties. And, I'd given my word to the investors it would be a 50-50 split, and I didn't want to go back to them and say, hey, look, we need to change it up now, right? And because I didn't do that, because at that time I didn't do that, that was the main thing for me that had me rack up all that debt. Because I now, instead of getting paid for these things that I was doing, I was only getting paid on the back end. And then sometimes there aren't profits, which we'll get to in a second, which leads to another problem. But for me, I had a deal structure problem. And then the other side of it, asset contributions, are when you contribute assets such as cash, such as credit, such as real estate. It can be intellectual property or know-how. So I mentioned that some of the key mistakes with this, and this is one of them right here, is that if you only receive equity or ownership compensation for the operational roles, when there's no profit, you don't get paid, right? And that's fine if it happens on one deal, but if it happens, well, one, it depends how long that happens for, right? And then if it happens on multiple deals, you can end up digging yourself a big hole. And then taking a step back, the bigger picture thing, and then this is when I changed things up, was that if I only get ownership for what I do operationally, I can never be financially free. Because how I get paid and how I make money is by operationally working in that business. Does that make sense? Right? So, and it's important to know and understand, because I imagine most of you in this room, you guys are real estate entrepreneurs. You're going to be working in your business. You're working in your business now. You're going to be working in it from the get-go. So you want to make sure that you're structuring it in a way that's fair for everyone, but also fair for you and works for you. So I had to go back to my investors and have a conversation with them and say, look, I know I said we were going to split it 50-50. I was going to handle all this, but I just can't do it anymore. It's killing me. I've racked up all this debt. I'm not asking you to solve that, but I need to get compensated for the operational roles that I'm performing. And all of them they were all great about it. They said, I totally understand. It's no problem. And it worked out great. Now, in hindsight, I wish I did that before I racked up 70 grand in credit card debt, but I had the conversation. Eventually, I had the difficult conversation, and it went well. And as a result, I was able to get rid of the $70,000 in credit card debt through not only changing the existing structure of my portfolio and the deals that I had, but then moving forward, this was the new model that I was using for structuring all of our deals. So after I resolved that, that's when we took our first mini retirement. We took 3 months throughout Asia and Australia. This was us in Phillips Island in Australia. This is in Vietnam on the Mekong Delta, I think. This is a tiger temple in Thailand. And this was a beach, I think, in Bali in Indonesia. So, you know, when you have successes or when you have wins, right, you got to celebrate, right? I got rid of $70,000 in credit card debt. Said, all right, we're celebrating. And we did that from cash flow, not by going back into credit card debt, right? So we get back from our first mini retirement. Life's great. Got rid of the $70,000 credit card debt. Think everything's perfect, nothing to worry about anymore. And that's when I learned that money doesn't solve problems. Money doesn't solve problems because I had a new problem on my hand, which was a cash flow management and allocation problem. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. So when I first started in real estate, as I said, I had no other form of income, right? So how I was making money was off of the income that was coming in. So I wanted that money that was cash flowing to come into my pocket instead of putting money aside for rainy days, putting money aside for this, putting money aside for that. If you have a property, and as you're looking at deals, if you have a property that cash flows $200 a month, that's fine, right? That's $2,400 a year, but you better be putting money aside for that rainy day fund, for that reserve, right? Because if your hot water tank goes, that's a few $100. Your roof, that could be a few $1,000s, right? That money that you think you're making can be gone like that. So you need to structure your deals to plan for that, and you want to put allocations for those buckets, and we're going to go into those buckets. And the reason why is the allocations are there to serve so that basically you're not stealing from your business to afford things, right? So now, before any money comes to me or our partners, we have those cash allocations that money is going to. And this does a few things. One, it allows for when the rainy days are there, that money is already there for it. The other thing, it doesn't mess with our cash flow, right? Because we already have that rainy day fund, so the money that comes in next month, that can still get distributed to us. Now, we may have to replenish that rainy day fund, but there's still cash flow coming into us as business owners, so it allowed me to project my cash flow much better as a business owner. So for real estate investments, you have to have a minimum reserve before distributions are made, all right? Or you can have a percentage of the income that comes in every month, have a percentage of that go towards a reserve. And I'd suggest putting it in a different account so that you don't touch that money and don't mess with that money. Business-wise, for a business owner, there's a book called Money Mastery, which I really like. It recommends 10% savings, 10% investing, and 10% emotional spending. And then you can put caps on those categories, right? So you don't need to put 10% in savings for the rest of your life. Maybe you just want to have a nest egg for that property of 10 grand, right? And then once you hit that, you don't need to put any more money in that bucket. But these buckets are important because those buckets get hit before money flows through to you. You still with me? All right. So anyone ever read The Automatic Millionaire? Handful of you. So it's basically a book about stocks. I'm not a stock guy. But the concepts in there I found really powerful. And he talks about automating your savings, automating your investments. And it's written by David Bach, who I actually met at another, it was actually a real estate event. And that's him and I there. But what I ended up doing for myself was, when that money came in, I had a separate bank account set up for the savings, for the minimum reserves. And when that came in every month, I had an automatic ACH that would directly go into the other account. And this is where you need to know yourself, okay? For me, at that point, I didn't have a bookkeeper. I was doing the books. I needed to automate it because I honestly didn't have the discipline myself to every month make that transfer myself. I kept saying I was going to do it, but it didn't happen. So by automating it, I set it up. I didn't have to think about it. If you have a bookkeeper, you can have your bookkeeper do it. But if you're just starting out and you're doing this stuff yourself, I definitely suggest automating it because that was a lifesaver for me, and that's what I used initially before I started building a team to help me with that. So, the biggest and most important thing really is to set a strong foundation, right? Where you have assets coming in, you have passive income, and this can take time to do, but being able to set that strong foundation is what allows you to build a sturdy house. Because of the way I did things initially, my foundation, as you just saw, was not that strong. Right? So I actually had to take a step back when I realized that, to go back digging that strong foundation. I mentioned at the beginning, I've developed about $5 million in real estate. This year, we're gonna, especially if the 41 unit goes through, it's gonna be a multiple of that I have in a single year. But the only reason that was possible was because I had to go back and make sure I set a strong foundation. If I had tried to do that 4 or 5 years ago, when I had that weak foundation, I would have killed myself and drowned. Does that make sense?